say this today, then we have hope. I know that my Redeemer lives and never prays for me. I know eternal life he gives from sin and sorrow free. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He wills that I should wholly heed word and thought indeed. Then I his holy face may see when from this earth life free. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that unto sinful men his saving grace is nigh. I know that he will come again to take me home on high. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that over yonder stands a place prepared for me. A home, a house unmade with hands, most wonderful to see. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. We're going to turn to the green books now and sing one. Four churches, many colors. We got green, we got red, we got blue, purple, we got white. In the green books is 596, Victory of Jesus. Excuse me, I'm kind of sick. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how he gave his life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about his groaning, of his precious blood atoning. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is due him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about his healing, of his cleansing power revealing, how he made the lame to walk again, and caused the blind to see. And then I cried, dear Jesus, come and heal my broken spirit. I then obeyed his blessed command and gained the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is due him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion he has built for me in glory, and I heard about the street of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is due him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. Call him Luke. Luke, please. I was listening on the way home to Ravi Zacharias and message that he was preaching. And he was talking about this particular song. And I hadn't sung it in a long time. That's such a wonderful message. It says, "Oh, sink your head now, wounded, with grief and shame weighed down, now scornfully surrounded with thorns, my own crown. How art thou pale with anguish, with sore abuse and scorn? How does that busy language, which once was bright, was morn?" And the second verse describes what our emotion, what our love for him calls us to feel. He says, "What language shall I borrow to thank you, dearest friend?" One says, "No greater love, the more men for a friend to be out to him his life for him. For this thy dying sorrow, thy pity without end. The pity of the Lord is unending, his mercy is eternal. Oh, make me thine forever. Should I thank him be? Lord, let me never, never, never outlive my love for thee." Beautiful message in this particular song. If you don't know it, it's not that hard to learn. Your sacred head now wounded, with grief and shame weighed down, now scornfully surrounded with thorns, thine only crown. I'm sorry. How art thou pale with anguish, with sore abuse and scorn? How does that visage lay Be here in our presence. We claim the promise that you make us. Where two or three are gathered in your name. That you are there in our midst. Lord, we're thankful for the way that you love us. Lord, we're thankful that you love us. And even though we're people full of fault, Lord, that when we stand before you, we can be blameless because of the blood of Jesus. Amen. Lord, we just ask you to fill us up tonight. Lord, just empty us of anything that would be a distraction. Lord, help us to be honest as we look at the Word. And just take it for what it says. Bless Donnie, Lord. Fill him up with your Spirit. Give him the words straight from you, Lord. From your heart to his lips, Lord, that he can open his mouth and declare the truth of God's Word. And Lord, we just ask you to help us to commit it and write it on the tablets of our hearts. I ask you, Lord, to bless each one that's here tonight. We're so thankful for each one. We pray that you bless each home represented. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Good evening. Once again, I greet you in the name of the Lord and say welcome. Glad you've chosen to be with us tonight. And I want to say a special thank you to Lance, who built the easel for us.
Amen.
That's a pretty good workmanship there, man. That was good. Appreciate that. Saying something that needed to be done and just did it. And that's much appreciated. It's good to see Philip and his family. Philip Doucette. I hadn't seen him in many years. I forgot Michelle's name. I couldn't even remember her name. It's been so long since I've seen him. So it's good to have him with us. And everybody, those of you who might be visiting in different ones, glad to see you. Well, everybody is aware of the situation in Paris. And on any number of occasions, when we've conducted conferences, it's in the shadow of terrible events like what occurred in Paris. And people want to know what is happening. Does this have any prophetic significance? Does this mean anything? Is it the Bible? That kind of thing. Well, the answer to that question is no. I cannot point you to specific things in the Bible about the event in Paris or ISIS or anything like that. But I can give you general principles from the Old Testament scriptures that have to do with the events of the last days and some things that are going to happen. I'm not going to spend time doing that tonight, but I'm just going to mention a couple of things. I heard Peggy Noonan speak this morning about what happened in Paris, and I think that she has nailed it really good. She was a speechwriter for President Reagan and also for Bush 41. But she's a very brilliant lady, and she's very discerning. And this is what she said. People in America don't understand why a kid raised in France would volunteer to fight for ISIS, raised in a free country. People in America don't understand why a kid from America, born and raised in America, under the protection of the Constitution, particularly the first 10 amendments, would volunteer to go to Middle East and fight for ISIS. And she said the reason is quite simple. Our people, and particularly our government officials, whether they're elected or bureaucratic, do not understand the power of religion. At one time in the history of our country, they did. People understood it. And they would fight for things that were good and righteous and noble. But we're in at least the third generation of kids coming up who know nothing about religious conviction, much less Christianity. So why are these kids writing on these college campuses saying things like, we need to get rid of the First Amendment? Have you ever heard of anything so ridiculous in all your life? And the reason is because they don't know anything about religious conviction. and they haven't been taught. You see, you take a person who was born and raised under religious conviction, whether it's Christianity or Islam, they will fight for that. And that's why these people are doing it, whereas everybody else is saying, well, I just never would imagine that. I just cannot understand it. It's because for several generations, we have thrown God out of the classroom and the boardroom and the courtroom and gotten rid of the Bible and prayer and everything else. So there is no religious standard whereby we measure anything. And I thought that was very good. So if you want to know why people are doing these things, that's why. Regarding what happened in Paris, that's just the beginning. We've been talking about this for several years that I know of. This shouldn't have surprised anyone. If what happened in Paris surprised you, then I don't know where you've been living the last few years. And look for it to happen again. And look for it even to happen in this country. It already has on 9/11. So this should not surprise us. Now, as Christian people, we know that this is indicative of the days in which we live. Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3 that perilous times would exist in the last days. We are living in those perilous times right now. So none of this should surprise us. And each time something like this happens, we should know that the return of Jesus for his church is just one step closer. I want you to take your Bibles and I want you to open them to Psalm 83. The 83rd Psalm. If you're familiar with the Psalms, then you probably know where I'm going with this. The question that is on the mind of most Christian people now is, how much more of this is God going to take? They wonder, is the great God of heaven sleeping? Will he do anything about what is happening in the world tonight? And the answer is yes. In the second psalm, the psalmist asked the rhetorical question, why does the heathen rage? And then later in the psalm it says, God looks upon them and he laughs. As if puny man, in his insolence and rebellion, is going to change the plan of God and in some kind of way make him cower before them with their plans. The psalmist says, he who sits in the heavens laughs at that kind of thing. But to answer your question about how much more is God going to be able to take, the answer is, I don't know. But I believe he's getting full. And the reason I believe that is what is said in Psalm 83. This is called, this is a song of Asaph. And in 1978, I heard Robert Shank say on several occasions that this psalm has never been fulfilled and it's going to be fulfilled. And Brother Shank, who's with the Lord now, said that he believed this is going to be the next war in the Middle East, the major regional war. You remember the one in 1948, you remember the one in 1956, you remember the one in 1967, 73, and then the intifadas, and we've had two of those already, and all that kind of thing. But the major regional war, I believe, in my opinion, is going to be the fulfillment of Psalm 83, not Ezekiel 38 and 39. That's coming later. And I'll talk about that in a minute. If you look at a map of the Middle East, let's say this is the Mediterranean Sea. And this is the Eastern Mediterranean. And you have a little lake up here called the Lake of Galilee. Then you have the Jordan River. And then you have the Dead Sea. like this. Israel's landmass is kind of like this, around the Golan Heights, back to the Jordan River, and then back down the Gulf of Aqaba and that kind of thing. Psalm 83 has to do with the destruction of Israel's enemies. I believe that he is going to use Israel in a very specific way to accomplish his rebuke upon, his judgment upon those nations that ISIS is dealing with now. Let's take a look at it. Asaph says, "O God, do not remain quiet. Don't be silent. Don't be still. For behold, your enemies make an uproar, and those who hate you have exalted themselves. They make shrewd plans against your people." Who is his people? Who is God's people? The Jews. That's right, it's Israel. They make shrewd plans against your people and conspire together against your treasured ones. They have said, "Come and let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. For they have conspired together with one mind against you, they make a covenant." And then beginning in verse 6, Asaph lists those nations that he's talking about. He mentions Edom, Ishmaelites, Moab, Hagrites, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, inhabitants of Tyre and On. If you would take those names of those nations and plug them into their ancient borders, you would see that today they have different names, like Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. Those are names of nations that were adjacent to Israel back when that was written 3,000 years ago. They're all there today, but under different names. Now notice what he said about them. Verse 9, "Deal with them as with Midian, as with Sisera and Jabin, at the torrent of Kishon." Now you can read the background on that. I don't have time to get into that tonight. But he says, deal with them that way. Verse 13, "O my God, make them like the whirling dust, like chaff before the wind, like fire that burns the forest, and like a flame that sets the mountains on fire. Pursue them with your tempest, terrify them with your storm, fill their faces with dishonor, that they may seek you," and you can read the rest of it. This psalm, this 83rd Psalm, has never yet been fulfilled. Now, I have colleagues that believe that this is simply a prayer, that it's not a prophetic issue. Mark Hitchcock is one brilliant man, good man, just he knows a lot and all of that kind of thing, but I disagree with him on that. I believe that this is going to be fulfilled. With that in mind, let me bring it into focus for you. In the last several weeks, the so-called Palestinians have been murdering Jewish people on the street with knives. You've been following that. Most of you have, I'm sure. They will just walk along the sidewalk and they'll pull out a knife to a Jew that is passing and stab him. Most of those people have been killed because everybody in Israel packs a weapon. But they're doing it. And they are afraid. Netanyahu is afraid that this is going to lead to the third intifada, where there will be war against these so-called Palestinian people. There's something you need to understand about this. At this point, Mr. Netanyahu is not pursuing a military option with these people. And there is a reason for it. He could, but up till now, he has not. And that reason is the United Nations Security Council. There are 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. The U.S. is one of them. When a resolution is brought to the Security Council, one of those 5 nations can veto it. Okay? And the resolution goes for nothing. Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel, is either fearful of what Obama might do, or has been told by Obama what he will do. And this is what he will do. If Israel goes against these Palestinians, fulfills this psalm, then Obama will tell him, you no longer have the U.S. veto in the UN Security Council against boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning, BDS. Remember y'all keeping up with the BDS thing right now in the Middle East, where they're having to label everything, and so people can boycott Israel with their products and things of that nature. If that would happen, if Mr. Netanyahu would take action against these people, immediately in the UN, there would be a resolution to boycott Israeli products. If Obama would not veto it, but allow it to go through, the whole world would boycott Israeli products. They would divest themselves of any company like Caterpillar that does business with the Israelis, and they would sanction them. BDS, that's what it's called. Which in turn would cripple the Israeli economy. They couldn't take it. They couldn't stand it. They can't stand on their own if the world boycotts them. So because of that, I think that Mr. Netanyahu is hesitating to take action against these people. But I believe he's reaching the end of his leash. I don't know how much more this man is going to take of this. When he sees his own countrymen slaughtered, burned alive, throwing firebombs on buses with women and children, burning them alive on a public transportation bus. That's what these Palestinians are doing, so-called Palestinians are doing. There is a time coming, and I believe that God is controlling this, when Mr. Netanyahu says, I've had enough. I don't care what Obama says, or what he does, or anything else. I'm going to do this. And I think this 83rd Psalm will be fulfilled. I think they're going to go to war with their neighbors in what is called the immediate circle of nations around Israel. That's these nations like this, right here. I am surprised every morning and every night by 2 different things. Number 1, the Lord has not returned to his church. And number 2, Israel is not at war. Okay, that's Psalm 83. That could happen at any time. Any time. Let's go to Ezekiel 37. Flip over to the prophet Ezekiel and turn to chapter 37. Give everybody time to get there. Ezekiel 37. This is one of the greatest prophecies in the history of the nation of Israel itself, because it speaks of the restoration of the nation of Israel to its land. In AD 70, Titus sacked Jerusalem, and he scattered the Jews around the world. That was completed in AD 134. But the Jews were killed by the hundreds of thousands. Their treasures were taken from them. The people that survived were sold on the slave markets around the world. And from AD 70 until 1948, the Jew had no homeland. In 1948, the nation of Israel was born again. Just like this prophetic passage says. In Ezekiel 37, it says, I can't read it all, it just takes too long. There's this valley of dry bones, and God says to Ezekiel, he says, tell me, who are these bones? And Ezekiel says, I don't know, you know, God. And he said, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They're dead. They're bones. They're dry. No soft tissue, no ligaments, no nothing. And he said in verse 11, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Therefore prophesy and say to them. Now this is what God says. Behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. Verse 14. And I will put my spirit within you, and you will come to life, and I will place you on your land. That prophecy was fulfilled on May 14, 1948. Within the lifetime of some of us here this evening. This came true just like God said it would. Later, the last part will also come true in the future. When he said, verse 21, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. And now notice this, yet future. And one king will be king for all of them. Who is that guy that's going to be the king of Israel during this time? Verse 24. And my servant David will be king over them. And they will live on the land. And verse 25, and David my servant shall be their prince forever. And read it for yourself. Jesus Christ is going to rule from the throne of David during the millennial reign of Christ. And David will be resurrected to be the prince over Israel. David, who's been dead for 3,000 years, is going to be resurrected and made the prince of Israel, as he was when he was alive. This text says that. And because the first part was fulfilled literally, we believe that that part is going to be fulfilled literally also. Not only is that going to happen, but something else that the prophet saw. And this brings us to chapter 38 of Ezekiel. This is called the War of Gog and Magog. Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, Thus says the Lord God, I am against you, Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal. If you take those names and go back to the original meanings of those names, you find that they apply, particularly Rosh, to Russia. Verse 4, I will turn you about, put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring you out, all your army, horses and horsemen. Ezekiel didn't know anything about tanks and planes. All of them splendidly attired. And then verse 5, he mentioned some other nations involved. Persia, who's Persia? Iran. Until 1936, Iran was known as Persia. Persia, Ethiopia, Put, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, Beth Togarmah, from the remotest parts of the north with all its troops. Many peoples with you. Verse 8, after many days you will be summoned. In the latter years you will come into the land that's restored from the sword. When my people are living securely. Verse 8. and you will come up like a storm. God is making a prediction about these nations that are on the outer fringe of Israel. And if this map were correct, you would see the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea in this area that they fought over several years ago. Sessia, South Sessia. Am I saying that correctly? Or Russia fought over. These are the outer nations that's mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now what is going to happen here? Well, verse 14, on that day when my people Israel are living securely, will you not know of it? And you will come from your place out of the remote parts of the north, and you will come against my people Israel in the last days. And last days that I shall bring you against my land in order that the nations may know you, may know that I am God. And then in the last part of Ezekiel 38, he describes death by friendly fire. And that simply means that your own troops kill you. I don't have time to get into that. Chapter 39 is essentially the same thing. Now this is what this means. At some point, and nobody knows who is going to be the president of Russia when this happens, but at some point, the leadership of Russia is going to want to go into Israel and take spoil. That's what it says. Read it when you get home tonight. And take spoil. What spoil does Israel have that Russia would want? Well, there are several things. But particularly right now are these massive oil and gas finds off the coast of Israel. This is the Mediterranean Sea here. This is Israel here. There's a place called Haifa. There's some docks there. You can see you see ships and all that. Just off the coast of Haifa, in this area of the Mediterranean, there are phenomenal gas fields. David Brown from Zionist Oil and Gas was one of our speakers at our Louisiana conference several years ago, 10 years ago. And he talked about his exploration in this area. Just last month, it was announced that Israel has found massive oil fields in what is called the Golan. That's that part east and northeast of the Sea of Galilee. You remember in 1967, Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria. Syria would use them as areas. It was a high ground. They'd move artillery pieces up there. They'd fire down on Israel down in the valleys and their farms and everything. Well, in 1967, they took the Golan Heights, and they have not given it back because Israel cannot be defended if they give back the Golan Heights. No other nation in the world would be asked to give back land that they won in battle. Will America give Texas back to Mexico?
No.
Not hardly. It's no difference between in asking that and what they're asking Israel to do. Do you think that the European nations will give back what they took in war, in a legitimate war? Of course not. So Israel is not going to give back that Golan because they have, first of all, because it's necessary for defense, and secondly, because there are tremendous oil fields, oil reserves there. So what would Russia want that Israel has? Oil and gas. Why? Why would Russia, with their own oil and gas reserves, want all this off the coast of Haifa and in Golan? Why would they come down to get that, to take it? What would they do with it? Folks, guess who provides Europe with their gas? Yeah! When they fought for South Sessia several years ago, why did they do that? Because the pipeline goes through that area. Gas pipeline. Putin wants control of oil and gas. That's why he's going to do it. When this was written by Ezekiel 2,500 years ago, Ezekiel didn't know anything about oil and gas. He didn't know anything about those spots off the coast of Iqua and up in the Golan. He didn't know anything like that. God simply said, Ezekiel, this is what I want you to write. And he wrote it like God said for him to write it. Today, in the 21st century, we know why they're going to come from the remotest parts of the north and take this area. Because Israel has something that Russia wants, which is energy. If you notice, after the fall of the Soviet Union, there were some entrepreneurs in Russia that became extremely wealthy. Guess who owns the oil and gas interests in Russia right now? Those same entrepreneurs. They see in Israel what they want. Now, how are they going to do this? They're going to do it by going through Persia, through Iran. That is their causeway into the Middle East. There is going to be a coalition that will be formed by Russia and Iran and some of these other places that we mentioned that will invade Israel in the last days. When will that be? Exactly when in the last days? Well, this is where I'm going to give you my opinion, and it's just my opinion, and you need to understand that it's just my opinion. And I can be wrong, but this is my opinion. If this is that timeline of history that we talked about last night, and if this is the rapture of the church, remember we did our little arrows and all of that kind of thing last night. We said this is the rapture, and then those left behind will be going through the tribulation period. Let's say this is the 7-year tribulation period right here, when Antichrist is running things on this earth. The fulfillment of Psalm 83 could be at any time. I believe that the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39 will be at the halfway point of the tribulation period. That's my opinion. And there are problems with that theory because it doesn't fit every detail of what's going on. But those who believe that it'll happen at another time also have their share of problems with their theory. And it could be that nobody is right. But this is the way I see it happening. The fulfillment of Psalm 83, which could be at any time, will clear the way for the religious sect in Israel to do something they've been wanting to do for a long, long time. And that is build their temple. Build their temple. We know that the third temple will be built during the tribulation because Antichrist is going to set himself up in that temple and declare himself to be God. We know that. So we know it has to be built. Well, right now, there is no way in tarnation that the Islamic people will allow Israel to rebuild their temple. If this is the Temple Mount, and this is that monstrosity, no. They call the Dome of the Rock, and this is the Al-Aqsa Mosque at the southern end. This is the Western Wall. Right now, Israel cannot build a temple on this mount. The Muslims will not allow it. Israel itself will not allow religious Jews to build a temple on this mount. They have said for years that the Dome of the Rock has to go because it sits on the place that the ancient temple sat. Not so fast. Maybe it does not. There's a little cupola located right here called the Dome of the Spirit of the Souls, and it is in direct line with the Eastern Gate. Dome of the Rock is not. There is plenty of room for a temple to be built in this area and still not touch the Dome of the Rock of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Some people believe that no Orthodox Jew would build a temple on the same mount as the Dome of the Rock. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just giving this to you as a possibility. This is something that I thought could happen. The fulfillment of Psalm 83, when they just blister those Arab nations around them with their idea, the Israeli Defense Forces, it could be that the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque could be destroyed. Or it could be that they'll put such a whipping on them that there is nobody who can stop them from building their temple. And that applies especially if the temple is not where the Dome of the Rock is. You see how close this stuff is? What's going on over there right now? Everything is about the Temple Mount. That's what the whole thing is about. Ownership of the Temple Mount. In 1967, Israel recaptured the Temple Mount. Within days, Marshi Dayan gave the Temple Mount back to the Muslims because they had two of their buildings on it. And he was not an Orthodox Jew. He was a secular Jew. The religion of Judaism was simply cultural. It wasn't really religious to Marshi Dayan. So this whole thing that's going on over there right now between the Jews and the Palestinians has to do with the Temple Mount. Remember what the Palestinians said the other day? What Abbas said, Mahmoud Abbas? He said, well, the reason we're doing this is because Netanyahu said that they're going to take complete control of the Temple Mount. And all the Muslims went nuts and started killing Jews. And Netanyahu said, no, I never said that. But Abbas doesn't care that it's a lie. It stirs up the people, so he keeps repeating the lie. So this whole thing has to do with this area we know as the Temple Mount. I believe that the fighting in Psalm 83 could very well clear the air, prepare the way for them to build their temple. They already have the clothes. Have y'all seen pictures of them? Right, if you go to Western Wall Plaza, which is, this is the Western Wall, this area is called the Plaza. Over here on this end, on the western side of the plaza, is a menorah that's going to go in the temple. They've got it under the glass case right there on the western wall. It weighs 80-something pounds. It's gold. It's beautiful. It's in a glass case that nobody can get to. It's there. I've got pictures of it. Take pictures of it. You can see it on the internet. They've got the vessels for the blood, for the offering of the sacrifices. They've got the priest's garb. They've got the garb for the high priest. They've got the table of showbread. They've got the menorah. They've got the altar of incense. They've got the laver. All that's built. It's built. It's sitting there gathering dust, waiting on something to happen that's going to allow them to rebuild their temple. Ready? That could happen at any time. Any time. And I believe that when they start, and Netanyahu finally says, I don't care what Obama says or does, I'm going to protect my people. I believe that when he finally does that he's going to sweep like a new broom. That's my opinion.
Amen.
That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's the way I see it right now. Now, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38, 39 that we talked about. When will that be? I believe it's going to be here. Why? If you read Daniel 7, Daniel 9, Matthew 24, and all of that kind of thing, all those texts, you see that Antichrist going to require the mark of people's hand and forehead at the midpoint of the tribulation. We've got the technology for the mark right now. We've got a computer sitting over there, and it will be similar to what that will be. You'll pass your hand under a scanner, or put a scan device over your forehead, and right now, I've got it, and you do too. You've got credit cards with little chips in them. You know those little silver chips about 3/8 of an inch square? That's got all kinds of your information on that chip. New passports, I still have an old passport. But new passports, guess what's on the front of that passport? Have you looked at them? A little chip about that square. But that's a biometric chip. It's going to have your name, your date of birth, all kinds of information about you, where you live, your hair color, your eyes, your height, your weight. Everything about you. It's there. The technology is there to control people with a mark on their hand or the forehead. They've been using this mark with their cattle for 30, 35 years. It's now. It's here. It's not coming. It's here, right here. And most of the churches, people are just sitting back, twiddling their thumbs, not understanding anything about what's going on. They go to church on Sunday morning, they sit around for a couple of hours, and they do this, that, and the other, and then might have communion, sing a few songs, and then go home and watch the saints or whatever they do. Oblivious to the days in which we live. Oblivious, purely oblivious. If the fulfillment of Psalm 83 will allow the Jews to build their temple, how is this going to play out? Like this. Antichrist during this time is not going to take control of the world as soon as he comes to power. He will not be able to. There will be other agencies out there in the world who will fight him. Now, you see, this whole misconception about Antichrist in Revelation 13, people have got that messed up. This guy is going to eventually do it, but he's not going to just waltz on the scene and say, everybody bow down to me. He's going to waltz on the scene and says, I have answers to your problems. I can take care of it. People will say, well, we'll give you a shot about it. And after a certain amount of time, they're going to have so much confidence in him, he is then going to impose upon the world population this mark that you read about in Revelation 13. But until he gets to that point, there is going to be somebody that's going to keep him from getting everything he wants to get. Guess who that somebody is? Russia. Russia has, look what they're doing in the Middle East tonight. They're flexing their military muscle. So he will not, Antichrist will not be able to gain and maintain global control like he wants to until Russia's out of the way. What did we say is going to take Russia out of the way at the midpoint? Ezekiel 38, 39. Antichrist is going to be sitting back on his laurels in some Western consortium of nations, and when Russia moves with Iran into Israel, just like Ezekiel 38, 39 says he will, and once they are destroyed, once the Russian bear is destroyed on the mountains of Israel, then Antichrist will see that there is no one who can stop him from doing what he's going to do. And at the midpoint of the tribulation, he walks into the temple. I think he's going to go into the Holy of Holies, and he's going to present himself as God, and he's going to say, I am God, you will worship me now. And then he's going to unleash a hellish holocaust against the Jews that will make the Nazis of World War II look like kindergarten children. That's a possibility of 1942. God's calendar is the taking out of the church. Psalm 83 can happen any time. It might happen in conjunction with the taking out of the church. I don't know. I don't really care because we're out of here. But what it means to you, if you're a Christian, is that your hope is imminent. Our hope is in Jesus Christ when He comes back to take His church out. All of this stuff about Russia and Persia and Iran and all of that, that's in the Bible and we should know it and we should study it. But when it gets down to the bottom line, we are not to worry about it. I'm going to put my head on my pillow tonight and I'm going to rest. I don't care what ISIS is doing in Paris or Dallas or anywhere else. My hope is not in the government of the United States. It is in the person of Jesus Christ. And when He comes and takes His church out of this world, we're out of here. Look, they can have it then. They want my bank account, my credit card, my tractor, my truck. They can have it. I don't care. That's what this stuff means for us as Christians. Our tenure on this earth is a lot shorter than most people would ever believe. Don't let the rapture surprise you. If it surprises you, you've got a problem. You've got a serious problem. Now, if you're not a Christian, then your stuff is getting weak. I mean, really, really weak. Not only is the rapture of the church going to surprise you, but the hellhole that will become this earth post-rapture is far worse than anything you could ever begin to imagine. You cannot imagine what is going to happen once the church is taken off this earth. Amen. Folks, in Revelation chapter 6, the breaking of the first 4 seals, 25% of those left behind will die from war, famine, disease, and wild animals. Read it yourself. Don't take my word for it. So you're in one of two groups tonight. You're going to go home and put your head on your pillow and rest in peace, or you're going to go home and you're going to sit there thinking, is this the life? That guy, was he crazy or did he know what he's talking about? David?
Can I ask a few questions? Would you mind?
No, I don't mind.
A lot of times, when I try to do a timeline for folks, and I got a guy I talked to about this very thing today at work. It was me and one other guy at work, so we had church at work, and he worships with our millennial Church of Christ, and they don't ever talk about any of this. Okay, so he's staring at me like a deer in the headlights. He don't know what's going on. Okay, I know he loves the Lord, but he is extremely ignorant of things because he hadn't studied. But other than the church, I got two questions. The first one is, other than the church, explain to everybody everybody who was involved in the different installations of the first resurrection. It started with Jesus. The second part will be when those that are dead in Christ will rise up, and it continues until the first resurrection is complete. And I love the verse that says, "Blessed is he who takes part in the first resurrection, upon whom the second death hath no power."
The first death is when you're born with an Adamic nature. You remember the Hebrew writer says, it is appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment. I don't think that has to do with physical death like that. I believe that has to do with the fact that every person dies spiritually. And then there's judgment. And that judgment was taken upon Jesus Christ. It's either he takes it or we take it. He took it on our behalf. Okay? The first resurrection is not a singular instance of resurrection. It's a series of, read 1 Corinthians 15, talks about it. Jesus was first, then those that is coming, and then later those martyrs out of the tribulation period and that kind of thing. The other resurrection is the resurrection of the the unsaved. They're not resurrected like Jesus or you and me. They're resurrected for the purpose, the sole purpose of judgment. The great white throne judgment is just that. There are no saved people at the great white throne judgment. Their resurrection is for the purpose of standing before God to have judgment pronounced upon them. Does that answer it?
Yes, yes, very good. Second question, and I'm thinking about another one too, I might have three. Anyway, when it comes to the Jews building their temple, I think it's real important, and I'd like you to elaborate on it, that the Jews, what would you say, 90% of the Jews that are there now are secular? I don't know.
An overwhelming majority.
An overwhelming majority do not believe in the person of Jesus Christ.
No.
And those who are planning to build a temple do not believe in the person of Jesus Christ. They want to worship Jehovah, Yahweh, and this temple that is built will be I don't think it will be a whole lot different than the religion that was going on in the days of Jesus when they felt like they were doing the right things and they were pious and they were going through all the acts, and the Pharisees were in charge of that. But it is not pleasing to God because they have, just, if you would.
Yeah, the temple that they're going to make it, that they're going to build, is going to be for the use of practice of Judaism, not Christianity. They already have the Sanhedrin. They formed that in the town of Galilee, up on the lake, several years ago. They already have their Sanhedrin ready to judge the law, as judges of the law, with the reintroduction of the practice of Judaism at the temple. They already have it.
Third question. What is the purpose?
Tiberius.
That's the name of the place? What is the purpose during the 1,000-year reign of the reinstitution of sacrifice?
Identity. The Jew is not going to be saved by the reintroduction of sacrifices. Nobody can be saved through those. But it's an identity thing. The nation of Israel will be the preeminent nation on the face of the earth during the 1,000 years reign of Christ. And the reason they're going to have this is for identity. Let me give you an illustration of that. It's got nothing to do with salvation, but everything to do with their being Jews. I invited Bob Mendelson to the church in Amite years ago. I wanted him to do a Jewish Passover Seder. Where he dresses up and he's the cantor and he has a table laid and he explains everything that he does. He's a Christian, but he's a Jew. His identity, that night I took him to eat at a catfish place, and he said, I can't eat catfish. Why? Why could he not eat catfish?
It doesn't have scales.
It doesn't have scales. It's a fish with skin. And as a Jew, his identity as a Jew, in order for him to not be a stumbling block to the Jews that he was trying to reach, he wouldn't eat catfish. Although he understood you want to eat catfish, or as Brother Stan used to say, you can eat polecat if you want to. It doesn't matter. But in order to maintain that identity, he would not eat catfish. And that reinstitution of the sacrificial system will do that.
And I'll tell you, we had a talk with someone recently. Wouldn't eat pork because they're still living in the Old Testament. In other words, still a roadside and still won't eat pork. But they'll eat catfish like it's going out of style. Come on now. But it just, it goes in, Timothy, 1 Timothy 4:4, to them, all food is good. But I was called an ugly word one time by another Church of Christ member because I stood firm on that statement. Yes, sacrifice will be reinstituted during the 1,000-year reign. I don't understand exactly why. I just know it will be. And those are things that I think we just need to leave that up to God. That's the way He planned it, and that's the way it's going to be.
Or it might have had some other reasons for doing it too. He just
God
didn't tell us. I don't care why they do it. It's just going to be good to be there.
And one other point I wanted to ask about these Jewish people that are here. You know, all those who've been regathered and are still being regathered in unbelief. And the building of the temple and the great stock that they will put in that building. And then what will happen at the 3.5 year period when
Yeah.
when things cease.